Well, I find our Gospel reading for this Thursday morning and our communion service intriguing. It begins with a question to Jesus from his disciples. Why do you speak in parables? Why indeed? Why did Jesus choose this method of storytelling to communicate his message? Couldn't he have chosen something rather more straightforward? Do this, do that, or don't do this, don't do that. Might a set of rules about how to live the Christian life have not been easier for people to understand? Well, the disciples posed this question to Jesus. They posed it as he was teaching great crowds of people who had gathered around him beside Lake Galilee. So many people had come that Jesus has had to get into a boat, and he was teaching the people from the lake as they sat along the shore. And Jesus offers the crowd parable after parable after parable. The parable of the good soil, the parable of the growing seed, the parable of the mustard seed, the one about the yeast, the parable of the weeds, the parable of the pearl. It's interesting how many of them we're familiar with. They're almost part of our subconscious, along with others such as the parable of the Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, or the lost sheep. And perhaps that's part of the answer to Jesus' disciples' question. Jesus was clearly a gifted storyteller, and his stories drew people in. They wanted to hear what was happening. No doubt they could relate to the characters in Jesus' stories. They were familiar with his images of farming and of home life. They were drawn in. They were all ears to hear how the stories would end. But Jesus' answer to the disciples' question takes things deeper. Yes, these people might be listening, but they weren't necessarily hearing. They were looking in, but not necessarily understanding. They were intrigued by Jesus, but not necessarily wanting to take up the cross and follow him. In other words, the parables are a challenge, but not everyone was willing to take up the challenge. In many ways, the crowd had come simply to be entertained, and Jesus was hugely aware of that. But to those who were listening, Jesus' disciples who had left everything to follow him, the secrets of the kingdom of heaven were being revealed. Jesus says to his disciples, "Blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. Truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it." He's referring back to the prophets, the Jewish people who were longing for the Messiah to come, for a saviour and a redeemer. And now Jesus is saying that saviour has come, bringing sight and understanding and healing of body, mind and spirit. And so I think this passage from Matthew's Gospel is a challenge to us today. It's a warning, if you like, not to be like the crowd who come and listen to Jesus from a distance, but keep him at arm's length. Not to be those who just look in from the outside, but then walk away. This passage is an invitation to come further up, to come further in the words of C.S. Lewis in his Narnia book, The Last Battle. Come further up, Jesus is saying, come further in. In other words, don't miss this invitation to enter into the kingdom of heaven. As we learn from Jesus' other parables, this is the pearl of great price. This is the treasure in the field. And we need to search for it, to give everything we have for it. For there is nothing on earth that compares with knowing Jesus.